In early 2023, an 18-year-old Minnesota woman named Vanessa Sanchez Lopez learned just how quickly disagreements can escalate when alcohol is involved, thanks to her impulsive decision to shoot her boyfriend, Manuel B. Hurtado. During an argument, police witnessed the disturbing aftermath of the incident when they followed the young woman's speeding vehicle to a hospital in St. Paul shortly after 2 a.m. Upon arriving at the emergency room, they saw that Hurtado had been shot in the head at close range. He was pronounced dead at the hospital. Witnesses told investigators that Sanchez Lopez had put the gun to Hurtado's head and pulled the trigger during a night of drinking and arguing. Right after Hurtado had cautioned her against mishandling the loaded weapon, she was initially hesitant to take Hurtado to the hospital because she was afraid of going to prison, and when she was questioned by police, she denied knowing that the gun was loaded even though witnesses claimed otherwise. In March of 2024, Sanchez Lopez was convicted of second-degree murder. She was sentenced to 20 years in prison and will become eligible for parole after serving roughly 13 years or 2/3 of her term. Number 27. Emery Gallegos and Savannah Davis. Shortly before 2 a.m. on September 15, 2022, police responded to a reported shooting at an Albuquerque apartment complex where they found 65-year-old William Vensil dead in his car in the parking lot. The rear window had been smashed out and there was a van's sneaker footprint on the door, along with some fingerprints. Using surveillance footage and other evidence, police identified the suspects as 19-year-olds Emery Gallegos and Savannah Davis. In the security video, Gallegos appeared to approach Vensil's car while Davis stood behind the vehicle, as if to block it from leaving. During questioning, the suspects reportedly revealed that the shooting occurred during a dispute over a parking space. Gallegos claimed that he had only intended to scare Vensil, but it was too late to take back what was already done. He and Davis were booked into custody on charges of open murder, conspiracy, and tampering with evidence. In November of 2024, Gallegos pleaded no contest to second-degree murder and 2 counts of tampering with evidence. He was sentenced to 10 years in prison, followed by 5 years of probation. Records show that Davis was also found guilty of second-degree murder and tampering with evidence, but the judge granted deferred adjudication in her case, which means she'll likely have the opportunity to avoid any serious criminal convictions as long as she adheres to certain rules and requirements set forth by the court over a specified time period. Number 26. Brelynne Otteson and Riley Powell. 18-year-old Riley Powell and his girlfriend, Brelynne Otteson, vanished in Joab County, Utah, in late December of 2017. They were last seen at the Eureka home of a friend, Morgan Lewis, whose boyfriend, Jared Baum, was known for being possessive and controlling. Shortly after the couple disappeared, their Jeep was found abandoned, furthering detectives' suspicions of foul play. In late March of 2018, police found the bodies of Otteson and Powell in a mineshaft near Eureka. Baum was charged with their murders just hours later. Investigators questioned Morgan Lewis, who said that Baum had returned home while Powell and Otteson were visiting her on the night they went missing. Angry that another man was near his girlfriend, even though Powell was dating Otteson, Baum forced the couple into their own Jeep where he bound them by the ankles and wrists and covered their mouths with duct tape. He made Lewis accompany him on a drive to a nearby mine, where he forced the victims to kneel outside the mine shaft that would soon become their grave. Baum proceeded to beat and stab Powell to death while making Otteson watch, then tossed the victim's body into the mine. He then cut Otteson's throat and threw her in. In April of 2022, a jury found Baum guilty of 2 counts each of aggravated murder and aggravated kidnapping. Prosecutors initially sought the death penalty but ultimately decided against doing so. After then, Utah County Attorney David Leavitt vowed to no longer pursue capital punishment. In June of that year, Baum was sentenced to 4 life terms, 1 for each conviction, without the possibility of parole. He offered a brief apology during his sentencing hearing, but it came as no comfort to the victims' families, who were disappointed that the death penalty had been taken off the table. Number 25. Destiny Kight and Charles Garrett. Destiny Kight and Charles Garrett were both 18 years old when they were shot to death in Johnson County, Georgia, in April of 2021. They were killed outside a home in Wrightsville that they were planning on moving in together. But instead of embarking on a new chapter, the two were buried beside one another. Several days after the double homicide, authorities charged 22-year-old Daniel Peyton Brinson with murder. He had been arrested during an unrelated police pursuit in Cobb County and was a known associate of Garrett's. Brinson was also a longtime friend of Kite's family, leaving her loved ones shocked that he was the accused killer. Nearly 3 years passed before Brinson and another suspect, Dakota Wayne Scott, were arraigned on charges stemming from the killings. Both men pleaded guilty, while a third suspect, John Patrick Suggs, remained uncaptured. As of April 2023, all 3 suspects were charged with 2 counts of malice murder, 2 counts of felony murder, and 2 counts of aggravated assault. Suggs appears to still be at large, while records show that Brinson is serving life without parole for murder, along with a 10-year term for trafficking methamphetamine. Dakota Scott does not currently appear to be in custody, and it's unclear whether his case is ongoing. News outlets fell silent on the case shortly after the suspects were arraigned, leaving the accused killer's motive a mystery. Number 24. Edwin Hurtado-Valdez and Cambria Sieck. 20-year-old Antoine Elijah Queen and 24-year-old Antoine Troy Briggs were shot to death in Glen Burnie, Maryland, in late March of 2019 in what appeared to be a targeted double homicide. Officers found Queen lying on a sidewalk with bullet wounds, while Briggs was found in the laundry room of a nearby apartment building. Both victims were pronounced dead at the scene by the time police traced the crime to 19-year-old Edwin Javier Hurtado-Valdez and his 18-year-old wife, Cambria May Lynn Sieck. The couple had fled the area and were thought to possibly be heading toward Mexico. The pair were identified as the alleged culprits based on eyewitness accounts, social media activity, and after evidence pertaining to both victims was found in their abandoned car in Pasadena, Maryland. Witnesses told investigators that they saw a male suspect digging through Queen's pockets before fleeing in a silver Nissan Maxima. Police tracked down the car and spoke with its registered owner, who happened to be the uncle of Hurtado-Valdez. He corroborated eyewitness descriptions of the suspect and identified his nephew as the owner of a social media account that had been connected to the killings. According to investigators, Queen and Briggs were longtime friends who had been killed during what appeared to be a marijuana deal gone wrong. Hurtado-Valdez was identified as the actual shooter, while Sieck was accused of helping him flee. Several days after the killings, Hurtado-Valdez was captured by Mexican police in the border state of Tamaulipas. Sieck turned herself into police in Anne Arundel County shortly thereafter at the urging of her family. Hurtado-Valdez was charged with 2 counts of first and second degree murder, 2 counts of first and second degree assault, and use of a firearm during a violent felony. He was found guilty by a jury in June of 2021 and is serving a 46-year prison sentence. Once he's finished serving his time, he'll be deported from the United States. Sieck was initially charged with 2 counts of accessory after the fact, but both charges were dismissed. Number 23. Alfredo Hernandez and Angela Pastorino. Alfredo Hernandez and Angela Pastorino were both 18 years old when they were murdered at a home in Southwest Bend, Oregon, in August of 2022. According to authorities, the couple were doing housework with 41-year-old Wesley Brady, who had agreed to help the homeowner, Melissa Adams, prepare the property for sale. At some point, an argument broke out and Brady beat Hernandez to death with a piece of wood. When Pastorino tried to intervene, Brady strangled her to death. In February of 2023, Brady pleaded guilty to 2 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of strangulation. He was sentenced to life without parole. During his sentencing hearing, Brady's defense attorney claimed that her client wanted to spare the victims' families from the pain of going through a trial. The defendant himself stated that he had tried to paint a picture that wholly placed the blame on himself. He said that he hoped the victims' loved ones knew that they were in a better place, but coming from him, it did not mean anything to the families of Hernandez and Pastorino. In May of 2024, Pastorino's mother and Hernandez's brother filed a $14 million lawsuit, accusing Brady and the owner of the home where the murders occurred, Melissa Adams, of luring the victims to the residence with plans to engage in group intimacy and partner swapping activities. But they did not inform the victims of these plans, according to the plaintiffs, who also highlighted Brady's extensive criminal history of animal abuse and ritualistic arson. The lawsuit further alleged that Brady had been diagnosed as bipolar and that Adams was a social worker who had been tasked with overseeing his mental health care. The plaintiffs accused Brady and Adams of plying Hernandez and Pastorino with large amounts of drugs and alcohol. Hours later, the violent confrontation resulting in the victims' deaths broke out. The current status of the civil case is unclear, and Melissa Adams has never been criminally charged in connection with the killings. Number 22. Tyler Witt and Stephen Culver. 47-year-old single mother Joanne Witt provided her teenage daughter Tyler with a stable material existence, including a comfortable home in the upscale Sacramento suburb of El Dorado Hills, California. But the two had a contentious relationship which only worsened after Joanne expressed her disapproval for Tyler's older boyfriend, 19-year-old Stephen Boston Culver. Unaware that the young couple were dating and under the impression that Culver was gay, Joanne had allowed him to rent a room in her home at Tyler's urging. She realized that Culver and Tyler were more than friends when she came home one day and found her daughter undressed in Culver's closet. Fearful that Joanne would press charges against him for having intimate relations with her underage daughter, Culver agreed to end the relationship. In the meantime, Joanne put his belongings out on the sidewalk and kicked him out of the home. Perhaps not surprisingly, the young couple continued to see one another in secret, and when Joanne found out, she followed through with her threat to go to the police. Determined to avoid legal trouble and continue the relationship, Tyler and Culver drugged Joanne and stabbed her to death in June of 2009. By the time police found Joanne's body, the couple had fled the area. They were arrested several days later in San Bruno and were both charged with first-degree murder. Tyler pleaded guilty to a reduced second-degree murder charge and agreed to testify against Culver in exchange for a sentence of 15 years to life. She was paroled in August of 2022 and is now living in the free world. Culver took his case to trial, and in June of 2011 he was found guilty as charged. He was also convicted of the special circumstances of lying in wait, use of a deadly weapon, and killing a witness, and is serving life without parole. Number 21. Michael Roark and Tiffany York. While stationed at Fort Stewart in Georgia in 2011, 19-year-old U.S. Army soldier Michael Roark joined an anti-government militia of disgruntled service members who called themselves Forever, Enduring, and Always Ready, or FEAR. Formed in 2011 with the primary objective of taking down the federal government. The extremist group's to-do list included some extremely heinous crimes, including assassinating then-President Barack Obama, poisoning an apple crop, blowing up major dams, launching deadly chemical attacks, and infiltrating the drug trade. The clandestine organization also spent tens of thousands of dollars on guns and other weapons, and had plans to build a training compound in Washington state. Roark's involvement with FEAR lessened after he began dating a young woman named Tiffany York. He eventually made plans to leave the military, causing the group to worry that he would snitch on them to the authorities. To prevent that from happening, 4 FEAR members lured Michael and Tiffany into the woods by inviting them on a hunting trip. After getting the couple into a remote area, the renegade soldiers ambushed them with gunfire, fatally shooting them both following an investigation. Christopher Salmon, Anthony Pedden, Isaac Agwigwi, and Michael Burnett were charged with the victims' murders. Tensions were high during a hearing for the accused shooter, Pedden, which erupted into violence when York's stepfather lost control of his emotions and lunged at the defendant. Prosecutors initially sought the death penalty against Pedden, Christopher Salmon, and Isaac Agwigwi, who were all sentenced to life without parole after pleading guilty to various charges. Salmon's wife, Heather, received a 20-year sentence for voluntary manslaughter, and Burnett was sentenced to 8 years in prison and 40 years of probation for reduced charges, in exchange for his cooperation against his co-defendants. Number 20. Jared Kemp and Deasia Page. Just days before Christmas in 2017, the murdered body of 58-year-old supermarket employee Tony Abad was found in the trunk of her car outside a Waffle House restaurant in Fulton County, Georgia. She had been robbed of her cell phone and beaten to death with a baseball bat. Investigators traced the crime to a young local couple, Jared Kemp and Deasia Page, who were both 18 years old at the time. According to prosecutors, Page had approached Abad in the parking lot of the victim's workplace and asked for a ride. Abad agreed, unaware that Page was directing her straight to her death. Kemp was lying in wait in some nearby woods, close to the designated killing location, where he emerged from the surrounding wilderness and carried out the murderous attack on Abad. 3 days after the homicide, Page was arrested for her role in the crime. She had reportedly mentioned the murder to a security guard who worked at a gas station near the crime scene. During her conversation with investigators, Page initially claimed that she and Abad had been attacked by 2 male strangers who forced her to help with the disposal of Abad's body. When it became clear that detectives weren't buying this version of events, she admitted to plotting the attack with Kemp. The couple supposedly planned to steal Abad's car so that Page would have somewhere to sleep after dropping out of school and leaving home. When Kemp heard that Page was talking with the authorities, he also went to law enforcement. He claimed that he had no association with Page and that she was crazy. Both Page and Kemp were charged with murder, felony murder, armed robbery, hijacking a motor vehicle, and aggravated assault. Page pleaded guilty to murder, armed robbery, and hijacking a motor vehicle and is serving a 30-year prison sentence. Kemp was found guilty of murder, felony murder, armed robbery, and aggravated assault and was sentenced to life without parole. Number 19. Thomas Grill Jr. and Molly Lanham. In early 2019, an anonymous informant contacted the Cedar Lake Police Department in Indiana with crucial information about a missing couple. 19-year-old Molly Lanham and 18-year-old Thomas Grill Jr. had been last seen days earlier. They were now dead, according to the tipster, who revealed that a fellow teenager named Connor Kerner had admitted to killing the pair inside his grandparents' garage while they were out of town. He then placed the bodies into the couple's car, drove to an open field, and set the vehicle ablaze in an apparent attempt to destroy the evidence. The informant said that they had initially thought Kerner was joking when he said he had killed 2 people, but the witness realized Kerner had likely been telling the truth when they saw a missing persons flyer containing information about Grill and Lanham. They shared the flyer with Kerner, who provided more details about the killings, but threatened to kill the informant if they told anyone. Kerner reportedly claimed that Grill had tried to rob him while meeting to settle a drug debt, and that he shot Grill and bludgeoned him with a pipe wrench while in a panic. He then summoned Lanham into the residence and showed her the body while telling her that he was going to let her go, but cautioning her not to tell anyone. When she turned to leave, Kerner shot her in the head. Kerner's grandfather told police that his grandson had recently admitted to stealing his gun. He also mentioned finding freshly repaired damage to his garage, presumably from the gunshots that were fired during the double homicide. In October of 2020, Kerner was found guilty of both murders and 2 counts of robbery. He was originally sentenced to 179 years in prison, effectively amounting to life without parole, but was resentenced to 154 years after successfully challenging one of his robbery convictions. As of late 2024, he was in the process of fighting for a lighter sentence due to his age at the time of the crime. Number 18. Giovanni Gallardo and Cynthia Alvarez. California teenagers Giovanni Gallardo and Cynthia Alvarez developed a magnetic yet toxic bond after meeting at their high school in 2010. Both teens reportedly struggled with learning disabilities, and Gallardo complained about being bullied, while Alvarez claimed that her mother verbally and physically abused her. When Cynthia's parents expressed their disapproval of the relationship, the young couple were unwilling to part ways. In fact, they were so determined to continue seeing each other that they were willing to go to any lengths necessary to eliminate any obstacles. In October of 2011, the decomposing bodies of Cynthia's mother, 58-year-old Gloria Villalta, and her stepfather, 51-year-old Jose Lara, were found buried in shallow graves in 2 separate vacant lots. Villalta had been strangled to death and Lara had been fatally bludgeoned and stabbed. Suspicion naturally fell on Alvarez and Gallardo, who had sold the victims' valuables for money, which they spent on snacks, soda, and decorations for a Halloween party they planned to throw. The home was such a mess that officers initially believed it had been burglarized, but they discovered the truth after finding a notebook that the suspects had used for writing notes to one another. Alvarez quickly confessed when confronted with the evidence, and Gallardo admitted to his role in the killings after learning that Alvarez had spilled the beans. During her trial in 2013, Alvarez argued that she had suffered lifelong abuse at her mother's hands, but the jury was unswayed and found her guilty of 2 counts of murder, resulting in a 51-year minimum prison sentence. Gallardo was also convicted of both killings and is serving life without parole. In deciding to impose the maximum sentence against both defendants, the judge considered the blatant lack of remorse shown by Alvarez, who said that if someone had lived in her shoes, they too would say to hell with the law. Number 17. Christine Chapa and Molly Olgin. 19-year-old Molly Olgin and her girlfriend, 18-year-old Christine Chapa, were spending time together at a park in Portland, Texas, in June of 2012 when a complete stranger shot them both in the head, assaulted them, and left them for dead. By the time some birdwatchers discovered the women the next day, Olgin had died from her injuries. Chapa survived with lasting injuries and assisted police in the creation of a composite sketch of the attacker, which law enforcement hoped would yield some valuable leads. But the case remained unsolved until 2014 when her father received a letter containing details about the crime that had not been released to the public. The writer accused a Utah man of committing the shooting, but the man had an alibi. While speaking with the police, he mentioned a former friend named David Strickland, who he believed had burglarized his home earlier that year. Investigators searched Strickland's car and found what appeared to be a kidnapping kit containing handcuffs, bolt cutters, and other items that might be used to hold someone against their will. The more evidence police discovered, the more it seemed to connect Strickland to the attack on Olgin and Chapa. He had also tried to immerse himself into the investigation in the days after the incident, which killers are known to sometimes do. After determining that Strickland had not attacked the victims out of a hatred for gay people, like many people had initially believed, and that the women were targeted at random, authorities charged Strickland with capital murder and assault. He was found guilty in 2016 and is serving life without parole, despite the discovery of new DNA evidence arguably warranting a second look at another man who was initially considered a suspect in the case, but was later cleared. Number 16. Paloma Gallardo and Yosui Salvatierra. Paloma Gallardo and her boyfriend, Yosui Salvatierra, were last seen alive in late January of 2025 before they vanished seemingly without a trace in Florencino Varela, Argentina. The couple had told their loved ones they were heading to the gym, but they went radio silent a few hours later and never returned. 3 days later, their bludgeoned bodies were found on a vacant lot near a homeless encampment. They had been beaten to death with a rock, leading to suspicions that they were killed in a robbery gone wrong. In what seemed like a preemptive response to any possible suspicions that the pair had ran off, Gallardo's mother, Alicia Pita, told the press that her daughter and Salvatierra were not trying to rebel or run away from home. She said that the young couple had grown up together as neighbors and began dating after starting out as platonic friends. When the story first made news headlines in February, police were in the process of reviewing surveillance footage in their attempts to identify the killer or killers. Updates have not been forthcoming, indicating that the investigation is likely ongoing and that no arrests have been made. Number 15. Adam Christmer and Samantha Lemming Christmer. Teenage newlyweds Adam Christmer and Samantha Lemming Christmer of Chickamauga, Georgia, were not even 18 years old when they tied the knot in 2002. The marriage was extremely short-lived thanks to a deranged killer named Howard Hawk Willis, who murdered the couple and dismembered their bodies with a chainsaw in Washington County, Tennessee, that same year. The victims' remains were found in various locations, including in a storage unit where Adam Christmer's head was found, in a confession that he later fought unsuccessfully to have thrown out. Willis said he blew the victims' brains out in 2010 after languishing in the court system for 8 long years. Willis was found guilty of 2 counts of premeditated murder and 1 count of felony murder in the perpetration of a kidnapping. He was sentenced to death row, and his conviction and punishment were upheld when he appealed his case in 2016. Willis, who is now 73 years old, is reportedly still challenging his case. In February of this year, he went on a hunger strike to protest the conditions at his prison, but it's unclear how long the strike lasted and if it ended in his favor. Number 14. Zachary Sligar. When 18-year-old Zachary Sligar's much younger girlfriend's mother refused to let her teenage daughter become emancipated, the couple obtained guns and hatched a plot to kill the young woman's parents and older sister. They put the plan in motion during the summer of 2018 when Sligar shot his girlfriend's mother in the face while she slept at the family's residence in Lincoln County, Oklahoma. Sligar also tried to shoot the girl's father, but the bullet missed and went through a pillow instead. The girl's mother survived after being rushed to the hospital with critical injuries, and while Sligar and his girlfriend had packed their bags and were ready to skip town, they were arrested before they could get very far. The story initially made widespread news headlines, but quickly fell quiet almost immediately afterwards. Records show that Sligar was convicted of 3 counts of conspiracy and 2 counts of shooting with the intent to kill. He's serving a 35-year prison sentence and will be released in 2055 at the latest, unless he accrues additional charges and time while behind bars. It's unclear whether Sligar's girlfriend was ever charged or convicted in connection with the case. Number 13. Austin Moffett and Alexis McCann. At a time when their lives should have just been starting out, 18-year-old Austin Moffett and 19-year-old Alexis McCann were tragically killed in a late-night car accident near Dunlap, Tennessee. The young couple were passing through an intersection in a Jeep in September of 2022 when a commercial truck T-boned the driver's side of the vehicle at full speed at around 10:30 p.m. Everyone involved in the wreck was wearing their seatbelt and the truck driver was unharmed, but Moffitt and McCann died from their injuries. They had just graduated high school 4 months earlier. According to reports, Moffitt had rolled through a stop sign when he didn't have the right of way. He and McCann were memorialized on social media by their devastated peers, who never expected to lose them at such a young age. Number 12. Gabriel Sanchez and Sanna McNeil. During what began as a typical work shift in January of 2023, a Travelodge housekeeper found 19-year-old Gabriel Sanchez and Sanna McNeil dead inside a room at one of the hotel's locations in Bexar County, Texas. Both victims had been shot multiple times. Surveillance footage showed the alleged gunman, 19-year-old Christian Ray Bermudez, walk into the room with Sanchez at around midnight. At around 1:15 a.m., Bermudez, Sanchez, and McNeil were seen leaving the room together. The trio returned to the hotel roughly an hour later, and Bermudez fled the room with a gun in each hand shortly after 3:30 a.m. He was detained on capital murder charges in March of that year, but was released from jail 3 months later when prosecutors dismissed the case due to a lack of evidence, despite the existence of the surveillance footage. 1 week after Bermudez was cut loose, he was rearrested on the same charges. Prosecutors received the go-ahead to reopen the case after presenting the court with footage of the suspect admitting that he had been seen with the victims at a local gas station during the time they were away from the hotel prior to the shooting. Bermudez does not appear to currently be in state or local custody, leaving the current status of the case unclear. Number 11. Nick Kunselman and Stephanie Hart. During the early morning hours of Valentine's Day in the year 2000, teen couple Nick Kunselman and Stephanie Hart were fatally shot at a Subway restaurant in Jefferson County, Colorado. They had survived the infamous Columbine school shooting less than a year earlier, only to have their lives unexpectedly cut short by an assailant who remains unidentified to this day. A Subway employee discovered the victims' bodies after driving past a sandwich shop and noticing that the lights were still on past closing. Investigators initially released a description of a young, white male suspect with blonde hair, but the influx of tips they received led nowhere. More than 25 years after the double murder, authorities are still determined to bring the shooter to justice and remain hopeful that a member of the public will come forward with a helpful lead, no matter how big or small the tip might seem. A $100,000 reward is being offered for information leading to an arrest in the case. Number 10. Jaquil Thomas and Angelique Bowman. On January 25th of 2016, the bodies of 18-year-old Jaquil Thomas and his girlfriend, 19-year-old Angelique Bowman, were found roughly 200 yards apart from one another in Norcross, Georgia. A surveyor discovered Thomas's body in the backyard of a home, while Bowman's remains were found in Thomas's car about an hour later. Both victims had been shot to death. Exactly a month after the killings, authorities announced the arrest of a teenager named Quintarius Walker on 2 counts of malice murder, 2 counts of felony murder, and 2 counts of aggravated assault. Police had identified him as the prime suspect in the case after releasing surveillance footage and receiving tips from the public. According to news reports, Walker admitted to killing Thomas because he was afraid of being ratted out. He was convicted of both murders in 2018 and was sentenced to 2 life terms without parole. Number 9. Brandon Anguiano and Yestine Carrillo. Teen couple Brandon Anguiano and Yestine Carrillo were gunned down in cold blood on the streets of Coachella in Riverside County, California in July of 2020. The pair had been dating for about a year and were sitting in a car at around 8 p.m. when a pair of gunmen opened fire on them and fled the scene, leaving investigators clueless as to who shot the pair or why. Deputies did everything in their power to try saving the victims, but their efforts were futile. Shortly after the shooting, law enforcement appealed to the public for information about the killers' identities and whereabouts. Police had very little to go on, other than a description of the gunmen as 2 males who ran from the scene in dark clothing. Efforts to track the shooters were unsuccessful, despite the use of canines and the Riverside County Sheriff's Aviation Unit. In October 2023, more than 15 months after the double homicide, authorities announced the arrests of 2 teenage suspects in connection with the case. One of the accused killers, who is now over the age of 18, had been arrested months earlier. The second suspect was apprehended days before the arrests were announced and was being held at a juvenile detention center due to his age. Neither of the suspects' names were released to the public because they were both minors when the murders were committed, and updates have not been forthcoming, leaving the current status of the case unclear. Number 8. Heidi Childs and David Metzler. On an August evening in 2009, Virginia Tech students Heidi Childs and David Metzler ventured into the Jefferson National Forest for a romantic date night in the wilderness. The teen couple planned to sit next to a campfire and enjoy each other's company, much like they had on previous occasions. But the night took a terrible turn when they were both shot dead in the parking lot. Their bodies were discovered the following morning by a dog walker, and the killer remains unidentified to this day. Childs' camera, purse, credit card and cell phone had been stolen, but Metzler's guitar remained untouched in his car nearby. In their efforts to solve the case, investigators spoke with numerous local residents and identified several persons of interest. But no arrests have been made, and the 15-year-old case is officially considered cold. Despite being at a standstill, members of law enforcement refuse to give up and continue to encourage members of the public to share any potentially helpful information in hopes that they'll finally receive a tip that breaks the case wide open. Number 7. Lindsay Shirley and Michael Anderson. Before sunrise one Sunday morning in March of 2016, a Florida teenager named Antoine Davis was shot dead along an otherwise quiet residential street in Ocoee after being arrested on suspicion of tampering with evidence and accessory after the fact. 18-year-old Lindsay Shirley led Orange County Sheriff's deputies into the forest, where her boyfriend Michael Anderson was hiding from law enforcement. Anderson had multiple prior felony arrests on his record, including an aggravated battery charge from just 2 months before Davis's murder. At the time of the shooting, he was under community supervision due to his previous crimes. He was only allowed to leave his home for school and work, and he shouldn't have been outside when the shooting occurred. In July of 2016, Anderson pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and received the minimum sentence of 25 years to life. He'll be 42 years old when he's released from prison in 2041. Lindsay Shirley pleaded no contest to evidence tampering and accessory after the fact and served 5 years of probation. The judge granted her deferred adjudication, sparing her from any serious criminal convictions. Number 6. Xavier Stevenson and Myla Payne. Late one night during the summer of 2019, 19-year-old Xavier Stevenson and his girlfriend, Myla Payne, met up with 19-year-old Logan Neal Young and 20-year-old Joshua Lamonte Carter to negotiate a marijuana sale. According to investigators, Stevenson had agreed to sell marijuana to Young at a discount, with the understanding that Young would sell the product at an upcharge and provide a cut of the proceeds. But they couldn't agree on a discounted price during the meeting, and the negotiation ended badly. After driving away from the meeting spot, Stevenson pulled over to urinate on the side of the road. He was in the middle of relieving himself when Young pulled up and fatally shot both him and Payne. Young and Carter proceeded to ransack the couple's car before making off with 5 ounces of marijuana and $500 in cash. Both suspects were arrested a short while later, and Young confessed to the murders during his first court hearing. In April 2023, Young was convicted of 2 counts of murder and sentenced to 2 life terms. Carter pleaded guilty to accessory after the fact and attempted robbery with a dangerous weapon, resulting in a prison sentence of 73 to 100 months. Number 5. Jada McClain and Quamir Muhammad. To say that 18-year-old Jada McClain and 19-year-old Quamir Muhammad weren't ready to be parents would be an understatement. In March of 2019, McClain gave birth to a baby boy at her home in Neptune Township, New Jersey, and almost immediately pressed her hands against his chest until he died. She then contacted Muhammad, and the pair discarded the victim's remains in a dumpster in Asbury Park. By the time police learned about what had happened, the dumpster's contents had been picked up and transported to a landfill. The victim's body was never found, but McClain admitted that she had hid her pregnancy from her family. She had also tried to end her pregnancy several times, including by ingesting drugs and alcohol in an attempt to kill her unborn child. In early 2020, McClain pleaded guilty to aggravated manslaughter, while Muhammad admitted to 1 count of disturbing or desecrating human remains. She was sentenced to 10 years in prison the following year, and Muhammad received a 5-year sentence. McClain had sobbed and pleaded with the judge for leniency while promising to never do it again, but he was unwilling to trust her on her word. Number 4. Tracy Miles and Paul Nelson. In late March of 1998, 48-year-old single mother of 2, Sandra Miles, was found strangled and bludgeoned to death on the floor of her Hutchinson, Kansas home with an electrical cord wrapped around her neck. The disturbing discovery was made after she stopped showing up at her workplace, which was out of character. Investigators quickly traced the crime to Sandra's teenage daughter, Tracy Miles, who had been absent from school for several days. Tracy and her mother had been extremely close until Tracy started dating. Sandra disapproved of her daughter's boyfriend, Paul Nelson, but she tried to make peace with Tracy, even buying her a Ford Mustang in an attempt to appease the young woman. Police suspected Tracy and Paul of killing Sandra because she had banned her daughter from seeing Paul. She had also forced Tracy to terminate her pregnancy about a year before the murder, which only heightened the animosity between Sandra and the young couple. Following her death, Tracy and Paul were charged with first-degree murder. In February of 1999, Tracy and Paul both pleaded no contest to first-degree murder, aggravated robbery, and forgery. They were sentenced to 25 years to life in prison and became eligible for parole in 2023, but are currently still incarcerated. Number 3. Janiah Henry and Christian Cofield. Early one morning in March of 2019, Delaware couple Janiah Henry and Christian Cofield were shot dead inside their Wilmington home by a trio of masked intruders. The killers barged into the residence at around 4:30 a.m. and opened fire on the couple, who had become parents just 3 months earlier and were laying in bed when they were murdered. During the intrusion, one of the shooters held Cofield's mother and other household members at gunpoint, while the other two went upstairs and killed the victims. The suspects had reassured the family that nothing bad would happen as long as they did as they were told, but this obviously did not apply to Henry and Cofield, leading to the suspicion that the killings were targeted. Those who knew the victims described Henry as a doting mother who was determined to give her and Cofield's son a better life than the one she had growing up. But that opportunity was ripped away from her, and the killers remain at large to this day. There have been no media updates on the case since 2019, making it seem as though police are no closer to solving the murders than they were when the story first broke. Today's topic was requested by Cali Girl living in Nevada 8. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comments section below. Number 2. Clotie Reyes and Andrew Chavez. 19-year-old Clotie Reyes and her boyfriend, 18-year-old Andrew Chavez, were shot dead while leaving a party in Lancaster, California in September of 2017. The couple was talking to friends outside the gathering when the shooters pulled up in a black sedan and opened fire on the crowd. Reyes and Chavez were pronounced dead at the scene at 2 a.m. after both being shot in the chest. Police believe that they may have been unintended targets of the gunfire, which reportedly broke out during an argument, but little else is known about what led up to the shooting. Year after year passed with absolutely no meaningful leads being uncovered by law enforcement, leaving police baffled as they attempted unsuccessfully to make some headway with the case. In 2022, a $20,000 reward was offered for information leading to an arrest, but the murders remain unsolved for now, leaving the families of Reyes and Chavez without the answers they desperately seek as they grapple with their devastating losses. Stick around after the last listing if you have not yet seen our episode about when being young and reckless goes wrong. That's coming up right after. Number 1. Laisha Landrum and Rocky Almestica. Florida teenager Emily Clemens suffered a horrific death in June of 2004 when she was brutally bludgeoned, then tossed into a dumpster while still clinging to life. Officers found her in a dumpster outside the North Tampa apartment building of her ex-boyfriend, Rocky Almestica, and his new girlfriend, Laisha Landrum. During her relationship with Almestica, Clemens had gotten pregnant and lost the baby. Almestica and Landrum got together after the breakup and had a child together. But Landrum believed that Almestica was still seeing Clemens on the side, leading to deep tensions between the two young women. On one occasion, Landrum left a threatening message on Clemens's answering machine stating, "Stay away from my man or I'll kill you." Although it's unclear exactly what happened in the hours leading up to Clemens's murder, authorities do know that she went to Landrum and Almestica's apartment after receiving a phone call from the couple. While there, she was beaten with kitchen pots, a hammer, and a boombox. Clemens's attackers struck her in the head at least 34 times before wrapping her in a comforter and discarding her like garbage. She was still alive, albeit barely, when sheriff's deputies found her. Emergency responders rushed Clemens to the hospital where she succumbed to her injuries, and prosecutors charged Almestica and Landrum with her murder. They were both convicted and sentenced to life, but were granted resentencing hearings following a Supreme Court ruling that it's unconstitutional for juveniles to be sentenced to life with no meaningful chance at freedom. Almestica was resentenced to life in April 2025 due to his conduct in prison and his alleged failure to take responsibility for his actions. That same month, 37-year-old Landrum was resentenced to 35 years, followed by 8 years of probation, with credit for good time and a requirement to serve 85% of her term behind bars. She could see freedom in less than a decade. Teenager Mary Quigley became known on social media as the rude 19-year-old following the release of her arrest video in the fall of 2023. Various uploads of the body cam clip amounted to millions of views on YouTube alone. On September the 15th, an officer from the Pullman Police Department in Washington had observed Quigley driving erratically in her 2017 Kia Sportage. She made multiple turns without signaling and at one point nearly hit the curb. Officer Brock Westerman asked the teen if she'd been drinking, but she was unwilling to answer his questions. After being told to step out of the vehicle, she refused to perform field sobriety tests and claimed that she didn't trust the police. By that point, Westerman had noted that she had watery, bloodshot eyes and that there was an odor of alcohol emanating from her. Westerman informed the teen that if she refused the voluntary test, he'd have to make a decision based on what he'd already observed. In the moments that followed, Quigley was handcuffed and arrested. While she was processed at the station, she used foul language while saying that she didn't want to be there. The teen then started crying as she sat in the chair and seemingly tried to slip out of her handcuffs. At one point, the officer told her, "I don't think you really understand the gravity of the situation right now because the way you're behaving is childish." The teen replied that she didn't care and that she wanted to go home. Quigley continued being argumentative and demanded her right to make a phone call. The cop replied, "That's a TV thing," and pointed out that she wasn't in jail but a holding facility, repeatedly asking her to get in the cell. Before she finally did so, Quigley swore at the officer, but he calmly retorted, "Yeah, I know." Users reacting to the viral video would later praise the officer's patience in dealing with the teen, whose breathalyzer test confirmed she was inebriated. During an October court hearing, Quigley pleaded guilty to DUI and was sentenced to 1 day in jail with 363 days suspended and 24 months of supervised probation. She was also given a 90-day license suspension and was required to attend a DUI victim impact panel. Quigley was a star water polo player at Auburn Mountain View High School in Washington before graduating in 2021. It wasn't clear if she'd pursued the sport in college, and if so, how the DUI arrest had affected her athletic career. Number 8. Miles Pfeffer. On the evening of February the 18th of 2023, Temple University police officer Chris Fitzgerald, aged 31, told his colleagues over the radio that he was pursuing several suspects on foot in an area of Philadelphia where robberies and carjackings had been reported. The suspects that Fitzgerald were chasing were dressed in black and wearing masks. As 2 of them managed to hide, the officer continued pursuing the third, who was subsequently identified as teenager Miles Pfeffer. Fitzgerald caught up with the teen at the intersection of North 17th Street and West Montgomery Avenue. A struggle ensued during which 18-year-old Pfeffer brandished a pistol and fired at Fitzgerald 6 times, fatally hitting him in the head and torso. As reported by the Philadelphia District Attorney's Office, Pfeffer then went through the officer's pockets and tried to steal his gun before carjacking an Infiniti Q60 about a block away. Less than 12 hours later, Pfeffer was arrested by U.S. Marshals at his family's property in Buckingham Township in Bucks County, an affluent rural area north of Philadelphia. He was restrained with Fitzgerald's handcuffs as part of a tradition to honor fallen police officers. Pfeffer was charged with murder, criminal homicide of a law enforcement officer, disarming an officer, robbery, theft, evading arrest, and weapons crimes. He faced terroristic threatening, robbery, theft, and other charges for the carjacking that followed the shooting leading up to the killing. Instagram photos of Pfeffer, who had a juvenile criminal record in Bucks County, showed him posing with cash, guns, and motorcycles. In one photo, uploaded less than 3 months before the shooting, he posed with a fan of cash covering his face and a gun tucked in his waistband, writing, Work smart, not hard. Make stupid decisions, face stupid consequences. Updates from late January of 2024 indicated that Pfeffer had waived his right to a preliminary hearing and was heading into trial. Speaking to the media outside the courtroom, family members of the fallen officer, who was a father of 4, demanded that Pfeffer be given the death penalty. Fitzgerald's widow described the teenage killer as just an evil human being, just an evil individual that has no regard for life. Number 7. Mikey Williams. Leading up to the spring of 2023, Mikey Williams had become a basketball star at San Ysidro High School in San Diego, California. He amassed a following of nearly 4 million on Instagram, over 2 million on TikTok, and clips of his highlights had been viewed millions of times on YouTube. His playing prowess and social media prominence resulted in him securing various endorsement deals. After he was approached by Puma, the 6'3" guard became the first high school player to have a sneaker deal. Williams and his San Ysidro teammate J.J. Taylor had committed to play college basketball for the Memphis Tigers, coached by NBA legend Penny Hardaway. On March the 27th of 2023, 5 people traveled to Williams' $1.2 million home in unincorporated Jamul in eastern San Diego County, where Taylor was also living at the time. A teenage girl would later testify that she traveled to the home to meet Taylor, joined by a group of friends in a Tesla Model 3 Uber. The female witness told the authorities that she went inside while the others waited in the car. Williams appeared to be enraged by the visit, and he brandished a gun. Other witnesses reported that they'd seen the basketball star with the pistol in hand and heard him making threats to kill them. He then opened fire on the vehicle, which had 6 occupants, including the Uber driver. Bullets struck the Tesla's rear windshield and trunk, but no injuries were reported in the shooting. Williams was arrested a few weeks later on April the 13th. He was subsequently charged with 6 counts of assault with a firearm, 2 counts of making threats that could result in death or great bodily injury, and 1 count of firing into an occupied motor vehicle. If found guilty on all of his charges, the basketball star faced up to 30 years in prison. Updates from late November of 2023 indicated that Williams had entered a plea deal admitting a single count of making a criminal threat. As part of the deal, he would be required to complete 80 hours of community service and attend cognitive behavior therapy, as well as gun safety and anger management classes, provided he remained out of legal trouble. His felony charge would be reduced to a misdemeanor upon the completion of his sentence. Williams was quoted as telling a reporter outside the courthouse, "I feel good, brother. You know, all glory to God. I'm just happy that I made it out of this situation." Number 6. Jervin Allen. A Texas high school basketball star and his brother were arrested in December of 2023 after they'd assaulted the former's coach in a school parking lot. Teenager Jervin Allen, a student at Willis High School in Montgomery County, was benched by his coach during an away game on December the 5th because of his behavior towards a player on the opposite team. While Jervin's actions remained unclear, the fact that he was taken out of the game angered him and his family. After the team returned to Willis High School, the unnamed coach was approached by Jervin and his 22-year-old brother, Jarek, in the parking lot. The incident began as a verbal confrontation but soon escalated to Jervin punching his coach in the face. Jarek joined in the attack and the duo inflicted injuries to the victim's head, neck, face, and arms before the brawl was broken up by another coach with the help of several bystanders. Jervin and Jarek fled the scene but were later arrested for assault and booked at the Montgomery County Jail. Number 5. Incident in Wednesbury. English 18-year-old Jack Norton had spent the day of December the 7th of 2022 with 2 female friends, and in the evening they were walking along Franchise Street in Wednesbury, West Midlands. The trio then encountered 19-year-old Brandon Price, who was accompanied by a younger teenager. After the latter two had struck up a conversation with Norton and his friends, the group walked into Cook Street and onto a grassy field known locally as Cookie Park. While there, the younger teenager became verbally aggressive towards Norton, telling him, "I want to put you on a fire and burn you, and I want to learn to drive so I can drive at you." Norton then told his companions that they should go, and one of the girls asked him to walk her home. He then tried to fist bump Price, who, without warning or provocation, struck him several times with a knife. Price and the other teen laughed as they fled, while the girls started screaming for help before calling the emergency services. First responders performed emergency surgery on Norton, but the 18-year-old died at the scene. In the incident's wake, CCTV captured Price and his unnamed accomplice running down Cook Street and excitedly celebrating the stabbing. They reenacted the knife strikes, and one of them was heard hollering, "You didn't think we'd do it?" Within days of the incident, they were arrested, and investigators subsequently found traces of Norton's blood on the clothes they'd worn on the night. During the trial that followed, Price claimed that he'd acted in self-defense, while his younger accomplice admitted to being at the scene but denied any involvement in the stabbing. The court, however, was told that he'd spurred the killer on and encouraged the violence. Updates from early January of 2024 indicated that they'd both been found guilty of murder and jailed for life, with Price ordered to serve a minimum of 20 years, while the other team would spend at least 15 years behind bars. Number 4. Darnell Silver Collins. Roughly an hour into a Delta Airlines flight from Amsterdam to Salt Lake City on January the 21st of 2024, baseball player Darnell Silver Collins became loud and disruptive and began touching passengers in his vicinity without their consent. His erratic behavior escalated throughout the flight to the point of him becoming physically aggressive. The 19-year-old, who played for the minor league Kansas City Royals, kept following passengers and at one point forcibly snatched a woman by the arm as she exited the restroom. Crew members and other passengers intervened to free her, and 8 seats were eventually cleared from around Collins in an attempt to avoid further problems. He soon joined the passengers that had been moved and started spitting at them. Collins then swore at a flight attendant and approached her aggressively. The woman would later state that she was grateful there was a cart between them to prevent the baseball pro from reaching out to her, even after he was restrained with zip ties. Collins persisted in his unruly behavior as he unbuckled his belt, got up and again tried touching other passengers. It remained unclear if his actions were influenced by drugs or alcohol. 3 seat belt extenders were eventually fastened around his midsection to keep him in place for the remainder of the flight, and crew members reportedly had to take turns watching him. Collins, who was originally from Spijkenische, Netherlands, and had played for the Netherlands national teams, was arrested and charged for interfering with the flight crew and assault by striking, beating, and wounding. His court appearance was set for February of 2024. Number 3. Terrell Green. In July of 2023, a Florida high school football star was charged as an adult in connection to a double shooting that had occurred on May the 29th in Fort Lauderdale. Teenager Terrell Green was caught on surveillance footage interacting with 2 teenagers in a parking lot near the beach in the 700 block of Sea Breeze Boulevard, close to the International Swimming Hall of Fame. The clip showed one of the teens approaching Green, and when he turned away, the football player shot him. He then targeted a second teen who was riding a bicycle and opened fire, hitting him in the chin. People were seen running away following the eruption of gunfire, and Green was shown in the footage fleeing through an alleyway. Fort Lauderdale police responded to the incident and set up a road blockade as they searched for the suspects while the victims were taken to Broward Health Medical Center for treatment. They were both reported to have survived the shooting. Shortly thereafter, Green was arrested at gunpoint as he was hiding in a grassy area near the Swimming Hall of Fame. Body cam videos of the arrest were later released online. Updates on the matter indicated that the teen was held without bond and facing charges that included 2 counts of aggravated battery with a deadly weapon and 1 count of possession of a firearm, while the motives behind the shooting remained unclear. Green's promising athletic career was expected to be derailed, if not ended, by the incident. The Plantation High School defensive lineman had previously announced on social media that he'd received offers from top college football programs, including the University of Miami and the University of Alabama. Number 2. Jordan Towney. In the spring of 2018, an unlicensed teenager led law enforcement on a high-speed chase through Western Sydney, Australia. 18-year-old Jordan Towney was behind the wheel of a stolen Holden Commodore, which carried 4 other girls, all of whom were underage. Security cameras captured the pursuit in which the stolen vehicle was heard screeching and sliding on the suburban streets. At one point, Towney accelerated close to 75 miles per hour in an area where the limit was 35. The pursuit came to an end after she crashed into a median strip near Carlisle Avenue in Bidwell. Onlookers recorded on their cell phone the moment the police took the 5 girls into custody. As they screamed and struggled, Towney appeared to be resisting arrest. The teen, whose social media photos showed her throwing up gang signs and double middle fingers, was reported to have had many dealings with the police and was already on bail for a different crime at the time of her latest offense. For the high-speed chase, her charges included theft, leading police on a pursuit, dangerous driving, and assaulting police. Updates indicated that the string of crimes for which she'd been responsible had resulted in Towney being sentenced to 42 months in prison, with a non-parole period of 16 months. Number 1. Dylan Murray. On March the 19th of 2018, Florida teenager Dylan Alex Murray asked his friend Giovanni Diaz to meet him in a wooded area near Calusa Lake Village, the mobile home park south of Lake Wales, where both boys lived. Diaz agreed as Murray told him that they were going to smoke marijuana together. Shortly after the rendezvous, Murray called 911 and reported that he'd just beaten his friend and left him bleeding in the woods. According to court records, he'd bludgeoned Diaz with a metal baseball bat with such brutality that the teen died within half an hour of Murray calling the emergency services. He'd suffered devastating injuries to his arms, chest, head, and face. Murray was taken into custody for first-degree murder that same day. He told detectives that he'd become angry at Diaz because he'd claimed to have slept with a girl that Murray had dated and with whom he was still in love. Murray initially claimed that it was Diaz who'd brought the bat and started the fight by hitting him in the face with his fists. Murray added that he took the bat from Diaz as he was threatening him with it and supposedly used it to defend himself. Detectives would note that there were no physical signs to indicate Murray had been attacked. When confronted with the inconsistencies of his report, the teen confessed that he concocted the self-defense story. He also admitted to have hit Diaz in the face after he'd already collapsed because he wanted to make sure the victim was not going to talk bad about the girl he loves anymore. A witness came forward and told investigators that 2 days before the murder, Murray had expressed curiosity about what it would feel like to kill somebody. Posts on his Facebook page suggested he had a fascination with murder, as they featured bloody clowns and a bloody kitchen knife. Murray's legal team requested a mental competency evaluation in February of 2019 and later stated an intention of relying on the insanity defense, citing that Murray had childhood onset schizophrenia and autism spectrum disorder. The criminal case proceeded after multiple mental health experts examined the teenage killer and determined he was fit to stand trial. Murray pleaded guilty to first-degree murder on December the 19th of 2019. He was sentenced to 60 years in Florida State Prison, followed by 20 years of probation. Updates on his situation revealed that Murray's appearance had changed dramatically since his incarceration, from a baby-faced teenager to him acquiring a number of face tattoos, including clown-like motifs and a creepy smile stretching across his face. Thanks for watching. Would you rather date someone who is 10 years older or 20 years younger than you, and why? Let us know in the comments section below.